Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for the finale of Global Genes Live, a Rare Patient Advocacy Unsummit. We are so excited to share this closing session with you today to discuss how we can all move forward together as a rare community as we look ahead to our new normal. My name is Kimberly Haugstad. I'm the CEO here at Global Genes, and I'm just here to kick things off today, and then I will turn it over to our discussion leaders, Ryan Taft, Linda Wade, and Parvarthy Krishnan. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Please do use the chat box to interact with each other and share questions or comments for the speakers. To open the chat, you can click on the blue speech bubble icon at the meeting controls located at the bottom of your screen. Know that if there are questions that are not addressed by the speakers or we do run short on time, we will do our best to follow up after the program. If you'd like to watch this session with closed captioning, you can click on the white CC box to start the live captioning. We also encourage you to share your favorite moments, your top takeaways, or pictures from home on social media with the hashtag 2020GG Summit. You can also tag us at Global Genes for a chance to be featured on our channels. Finally, we do encourage you all to participate as active listeners and take advantage of this opportunity to hear from these amazing leaders. I'm sure the chat will be lively, as it always is, with questions and comments. Now let's turn it over to Ryan Taft, Vice President of Scientific Research at Illumina, to kick off our introductions. Ryan, take it away.
Thank you, Kimberly. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here. I've been part of the Global Genes community for now almost 5, maybe close to 6 years. This summit is always one of my favorite events of the year. It's one of those places where you get recalibrated as a scientist about what we're all really trying to get done on a day-to-day basis. My journey started with a little boy who needed a diagnosis, and it changed my life. And it's kind of plotted the course for me ever since. So I'm just delighted to be here. I wanted to acknowledge that there has been a slight schedule change. We were originally going to talk to 2 women, Debbie and Delaney, who have been on an incredible diagnostic odyssey and what's happened to them. Unfortunately, Delaney's had an acute medical issue and she's not able to join us. But we want to wish them the very best and Delaney a very speedy recovery. I'm now going to ask Linda and Parvathy to introduce themselves. I'll start with Linda, and then we're going to really have a discussion about, the times we find ourselves in and how the rare disease community is responding and how we're plotting a course forward to an even better and brighter future. So Linda, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm so glad to be here on today. Thank you, Global Genes, for the opportunity. I'm Linda Thomas Wade, President and CEO of the Sickle Cell Association of Texas, the Mark Thomas Foundation, where we've been serving families living with sickle cell disease since 1997. My late husband, the late great pastor and founder, Mark Thomas, lived with sickle cell disease and unfortunately passed away at the age of 46, but we continue to carry on his legacy and mission, where we provide hope and help for families living with sickle cell disease.
Beautiful. Thank you, Linda. And Parvati?
Hi, everyone. It's been a great 2 weeks of learning with all of you with the Unsummit. My name is Parvathy. I am a rare disease patient. I'm also mom to 2 medically complex children, Yash and Ira. They have a multitude of rare diseases, including CMMRD. As far as we know, they are the only people in the world with this condition. I'm also the chair of the Patient Family Advisory Board at UNC Children's Hospital, a pediatric advocate representative for the North Carolina Serious Illness Coalition. It is my pleasure and my honor to also be the Foundation Alliance manager with Global Genes, and I'm so excited to be here with all of you.
Yeah, and we're excited to have you both. So thank you both for joining. I think one of the things that I think we should acknowledge right at the top of this section is we are really in unprecedented times, right? We've got billions of people worldwide affected with a horrible virus. And the rare disease community has been particularly affected. I was just reflecting earlier this morning with a couple of colleagues that I've been on 3 or 4 calls in just the last 48 hours with individuals who have been trying to get care and had difficulty getting it, concerned about the clinical trial that they're a part of. But what amazed me about each of those conversations was the resilience that I heard in those families and those patients, and the hope on the other side of it, and the willingness to tackle tough problems head on. And it's one of the things that consistently inspires me about this community. And so I wondered if each of you could just comment on that. How are you seeing that sense of resilience play out? And where are you seeing hope in the communities that you engage in? So Linda, I might start with you with that question.
Okay, well, I do want to say that our community is very resilient. Being a community which is primarily individuals of color, there has been many challenges. And living with a rare disease is one, but now also being faced with the pandemic, racial injustices and inequalities, and social injustice. It's just so much going on. And then to have the pandemic on top of that, our families, even in these unsettling times, they are resilient. And one way that I think that keeps our families engaged and hopeful is prayer, because we know that prayer changes things. And I think that as a person of color and a community of color, that is what really has gotten us through.
Thanks, Linda. And Parvati?
I think just as a rare disease community, a patient or a caregiver to a rare disease child or adult, I think it's, along with everything else in our DNA, to just be resilient, to just fight no matter what. And I think, unfortunately, we have all been equipped with going with the flow and learning to pivot when needed. And I feel like amongst everything else in this pandemic, we actually are the community that was really prepared for it, because this has been our life. We have always been like this. We've always been in a state of chaos, but to find reason and to find a purpose in the midst of this chaos is what all of our journeys have been. And so I have found hope in the physicians and the nurses and the researchers who have continued to want to do what they're doing for all of us. In the midst of the injustice, in the midst of all of that, when I still walk into the hospital and I see them smile and I see them putting their life at risk to care for my child, it gives me hope that we will get through this together. And I feel like that's the hope I hold on to. No matter what happens, we will get through this. And like we have in the past, And like we are right now, and most likely in the future, it's all going to happen. But I think the rare disease community is best equipped to keep moving forward.
That's great. I totally agree. And one of the things I took from what you just said is that sense of adaptability, right? Like we're going to take whatever's happening and we're going to evolve to meet that need, and then we're going to get around it and find an answer. Parveen, I wondered if you could just comment on what we were talking about before we launched the panel, just what you're having to go through with Yash to get him care, and how you're about to get on a plane. Because I think that's exemplary of what we're talking about here today. You know, you started doing one thing to get him up to Boston Children's. Now you've got to do another. So I wondered if you could just comment on that a little bit.
Absolutely. In the midst of the pandemic is when they finally decided that he would be perfect to start his immunotherapy trial. No one else has received this medication for the condition. And they were like, let's just shoot in the dark. It's experimental anyway. So we said, okay. And because everything was shut down and we were also supposed to be in quarantine, we would drive every 3 weeks to Boston. And that's how we started. In the beginning of the pandemic, it would take us only 9 hours to go because there was nobody in the roads. Every state was closed. And move forward now, it takes us about 15 hours because, you know, people have come back to life, and which is good. But as a family with rare disease, we mapped out that it was much more exposure to drive on the road than to fly. So we made the hard decision, but we did decide we'll start flying back again to Boston, and we go with the flow. And we also realized that the FDA has changed their protocol with the pandemic in mind. So for me, that I took it as a positive that they have recognized that this is needed, but they've also changed how they do their study, which is unheard of until now. In the middle of a study, they have decided that instead of every 3 weeks, it is better for families to come every 6 weeks. And so for me, I hope that these exemptions that are being made now will continue to be made, and that in the midst of the pandemic, the rare disease community can pick up all of these wonderful, positive changes that we're implemented and make it happen when we're past the pandemic. Because let's be real, nobody wants to go to the hospital every 3 weeks. It is definitely better to be there every 6 weeks instead of every 3 weeks. So that it has been a huge change for us, but one that we go with the flow.
That's great. And I want to come back to that, those questions and issues around access and accessibility and how the pandemic is going to change that for all of us. But before we kind of get into that, Linda, I wanted to go back to some of the comments you made about your community and the African-American community having to be resilient, having to be adaptable. I wondered if you could just comment a little bit more about kind of how you've seen that play out in the community at large, but particularly with the sickle cell community that you support, and how you think that's setting us up maybe for success, for further growth, you know, for seeing more and better implementation of medicine in that community.
Well, in the past, I think, as we all know, the sickle cell community did not gain the much needed support as other diseases. And it was due primarily because it was considered an African-American disease, in which we know that sickle cell disease and sickle cell trait affects all persons. I am proud of the sickle cell community because we call them warriors, because no matter what the situation, they have learned to triumph and excel in spite of living with a health condition. Our community is very resilient, adaptable, and just knows how to navigate. And I think a part of that, as my sister was saying, is it is the ability, because it's in our DNA. As you mentioned, African Americans or as Black individuals, we have had so much opposition with discrimination, racial injustice, and different challenges. And over the years, we have learned how to handle every situation, and we've came out on top. I'm hopeful that now sickle cell disease is getting more support and awareness. And I'm hopeful the different gene therapies and different treatment that our families will live a more successful and productive life. And so we are hopeful.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Linda. I want to come back to that question of access. And it's something that's certainly been top of mind for me as we look at some of the patients I work with. So we have a clinical lab that we run at Illumina. I've had several of my clinical trials actually shut down because we just weren't able to get patients. So that was kind of on the negative side. On the positive side, we're seeing this huge upswelling of telemedicine. We're seeing the FDA, as Parvati has already pointed out, really be flexible in terms of how we're going to get care to these patients. And I wondered if you both had comments and thoughts on that. How do you think this is going to play out long term? Is there an opportunity? Is there a hidden benefit in the pandemic that's actually going to support the rare disease community long term? So maybe I'll start with Linda to make things easy.
I think, my mother used to say this, when you have lemons, you make lemonade, and then you add a little sugar, it's sweeter. The way I see it is this is a challenge, but it is also a great opportunity because it enables us to reach out in so many ways that we did not have before. For example, with telehealth, and our families would rather not go to the hospital. They would prefer to stay home. And many of them would wait until the very last in order to go. So that there's telehealth, that's a benefit. Now that there's our organization provide mental health services where they can just call in, that's access. Also, I want to mention prayer because another beautiful opportunity is in our community, we believe in prayer. And so with the pandemic, what we have done, we have started a prayer line. And I tell you, the prayer line has been a tremendous blessing and has made a difference in so many lives. One of our young ladies who is a health worker, as well as she lives with sickle cell disease, and she also contracted COVID. We asked her, how did she get through it? Because thank God she's doing very well. She said it was through prayer, the encouragement, because of course now our families are isolated and often feel alone. And going through that process, she was alone. She said, but to know that there were people praying for her, that gave her the strength and the will to fight. So I do want to say, even though this pandemic has taken a toll, it's also been a blessing in the sense that it shows us that we are a great people, we are stronger, and we are resilient.
That's wonderful, Linda. Parvati?
I think I'm going to quote an example Nina Nazar, a very close friend of the Foundation Alliance, mentioned to us on another call some days ago. She said, this is the time we need to look at the process that has happened because of the pandemic and because of everything that's going on. A vaccine that usually would have been unheard of to be approved in 6 months or even go to a phase 2 or phase 3 trial in this short of a period shows us, yes, there's a bigger need than maybe the one child in the world that my son would need to get a medicine. But what are the things that they did for it to be accelerated so fast? There are so many things that we can learn from that process that can be hopefully implemented throughout all rare diseases, or at least the ones that can get funding to increase the speed of which it can be tested. I feel like virtual appointments are making our world a little smaller. So if we do find another patient somewhere else in the world with the condition that my son has, then maybe having these virtual visits will count instead of trying to fund to bring that child over to this country. So I'm really hopeful that this will open pathways to think outside the box, which is much needed in our community, and will also open actual channels that will allow for it instead of it being a more difficult roadblock for us.
And if I could,
please
chime in. My sweet sister, Kimberly, had sent me a quote, a Barry Grider, and it says, "Sometimes God calms the storms in our lives, but not always. Sometimes he raises the storm and calms the person. That's even better." And that quote really touched me because I love the fact that we all have storms. But I'd also like to add that God is the peace in the middle of this storm. God is the peace in this pandemic. God is the hope of our lives. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little excited. Okay, you all know I'm a person of color, so I'm getting...
That's why we're so glad you're here, Linda. We want you to get excited. That's beautiful. Maybe we talk about that calm in the storm just a little bit. You know, it's not just the pandemic that we're confronting, right? We have issues of social justice that the community is facing, racial justice, issues of access and equity, which we've already talked about. And of course, here at Global Genes, we're very interested in the community of rare disease patients that we support, many of whom are disabled and need as much support as they can get. How do you guys think about that intersection of those different needs in the community and how they're bubbling up today and how that might play out going forward? And Linda, you know, if we go back to the comment you just made, you know, it's tough sometimes to find a calm in the midst of that storm, but I think it's imperative that we do to kind of plot the course forward. So I wondered if you just might kind of talk about that, all these influences that we're now kind of seeing, maybe things that were hidden or overlooked are now bubbling up to the surface. And how does that all intersect with the rare disease community that we're here supporting today?
I think that coming together, even remotely, makes a difference. I think us being able to sit down and hear one another, hear each other's challenges and concerns, being sensitive, one for the other. There's, for us, we use, one channel is SOS support groups, where others, even though they can't get out or are feeling isolated, where we can just sit down and share. And I want to say Global Genes have been a blessing in that. In inclusion, we have to include one another. We need each other. And so we are all a part of this community, regardless of the condition or the illness. It takes all of us. It takes a village. It takes a community to work together.
That's great. Parvati, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah. To start off with, this is my first summit experience at Global Genes, but throughout the week, when I saw all of the speakers come up and all the amazing things that they have done, I sat back and I was like, okay, what have we done? You know, have we done enough? I just felt like we so overwhelmed by all the amazing things that they had done. And I was wondering, I was like, okay, what can we do today? But then I realized that our motto for our family has always been, it does not matter how long you live. It matters how well you live and what you do with what your life does. And so when our daughter passed away at 4 2 years ago, yes, it was the most devastating thing that happened to us, but we took that opportunity to say, okay, what can we continue to do to ensure that other families can benefit from our experience or learn something? And to this day, we continue to share her research data, her lab work, or whatever it is that they have in the repository to continue her legacy. We continue to fight for our son. And to me, what matters is that, we may not open a huge foundation or start this trial, and that may not be something that I have the bandwidth for, but whether I'm a mom sitting in a hospital for the nth time, wondering how we're going to get through this admission, or, we're fighting with our doctors to say, okay, we matter, we don't know what is happening, but something is happening. No matter where you are in this odyssey of your rare life, know that you matter. Know that your small role will count, will matter to someone who comes behind you, because it's not the end. And one of my very favorite quotes from Arthur Ashe is, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can, because we can really, small drops make an ocean, and we can really make a difference. And so whether it's to support our brothers and sisters who are fighting the fight in the African-American community, or whether it's to access, when you get universal access for everyone in the rare disease community, everybody benefits. So no matter where you are in the spectrum of experiences and in the spectrum of what you can do, you can definitely do something where you are today.
That's so true. That is so true. We are helpers one to the other. And it is the community coming together that brings about change. And so that is what gives me hope, and our community hope. So I just wanted to add that. Very well said.
I'm wondering if we can build off of what you've both just said, because I'm seeing some questions come through, and it's the same question I've had at multiple points during, the journey we've all been on for the last 6 or 9 months with COVID, and seeing, the social unrest and social issues raised throughout the U.S., at least, if not the world, which is, how do we take this back to our communities? How do we action this? How do we make this call to arms real? And I know it's not an easy question to answer, because I think we're all struggling with that. But I hoped both of you might be willing to comment on it. And I think you are already kind of heading that direction, really, with, you got to start where you are. You got to start with the community. But I wondered if you had anything else you'd like to add to that in terms of, like, we've got a big audience here. How can those people go out and start to make a difference? And Linda, you've got a huge smile on your face, so I'm going to go to you right away.
I'm smiling because you said, how can we bring that back to the community? And right now, with the racial injustice, we are the community. You can't walk in my shoes, but you could walk alongside me and be sensitive. That's what I would like to share. Is the Bible says, well, we are our brother's keeper. We are to look out for one another. And it gives us hope as people of color, Blacks primarily, when it's not just our voice, but it's everyone's voice. Because together we make up a beautiful rainbow. Even though we're different, we come from different backgrounds, different walks of life. We are all in this race together, the human race. And so that's it. I'm trying not to.
That is it. No, you can preach. You can preach. We're here to listen. That was beautiful. Go ahead, Linda.
Oh, no, please. Go ahead.
Okay, we might pass the baton to Parveen. Oh.
One of the big takeaways I had from all of the movies, amazing movies that made me cry all of last week, and one that I will always remember is inch stones. Don't look for milestones, look for inch stones. And as a mom to two different kinds of kids, one that was nonverbal and completely dependent on me versus my son, who was much more active and talkative and can tell me what he wants. I wish I had known this when I was going through that journey of watching both of them grow up, and continue to do it now. But that can be extrapolated to anything. If you run an organization and you're sad and you're frustrated that you're not able to get your community together because of COVID and quarantine, inch stones is all that matters. Find what you can do right now to do what they need through Zoom. Yes, it's not the same. Yes, not everybody's being engaged the same way that it would be if we're in person, but it's an inch stone. You made an effort for it. If you're a caregiver or a parent in a hospital wondering, oh my God, what can I do? I want to do something. Just walk around and see if there's another parent who just wants to talk to you. That is moving the needle. Again, what happens today matters. And if you're an organization, make sure that you have a broader representation. A broader representation of everybody on the board. Make sure that reaching out to other members from different communities and different colors. Make sure if you're in the process of working with the FDA, make sure you can ask the question, okay, once we get through this, how can everybody who comes after us benefit from it? Inch stones.
That's great, Parvarthy. Thank you. I think let's build on that theme of inch stones for just a moment. You know, one of the things that we haven't touched on yet is there are some parts of the community, the global genes community, the rare disease community, that aren't feeling included right now, that feel quite isolated. And Parvarthy, you already kind of alluded to this, that you feel like your world's gotten a bit smaller. I wondered if both of you could comment on how people who are listening to this might make their world feel a little bit bigger, and how we might go about getting those groups who might feel isolated, more included and part of the community and connected to the rest of the community. Anybody want to take that?
I'll take it.
Great.
I think one of the common things that as rare disease families that connect us together is it doesn't matter what the actual diagnosis is, our experiences remain the same. My fight to get PT for my child, or the organization I work with having no funds, or is trying to look for sponsors. No matter what, we all are having issues, and what we can do is reach out to the community, reach out to the Foundation Alliance, reach out to Global Genes, reach out to Illumina, and see what can we do. This is what is going on with us. I can reach out to other rare disease families who are going through the same and ask them and problem solve with them about how it feels. Okay, we're going to the clinic and we're super scared about possibly getting COVID. What have you done and what can you do? There are not very many others who can relate to that, who are not either a rare disease family or a cancer family or what have you. And I feel like reaching out to your peers, your support groups, makes it absolutely worthwhile, no matter what. And if I have to wait to find one other family with this condition, then I'll be waiting, and it'll be a long wait. And so I say, don't look at the difference. Just make sure that you reach out to someone.
And I would just like to add to that. Some rare space diseases get a lot of support in terms of finances, awareness, and assistance. While sickle cell disease in the past, as I mentioned earlier, we were not one of those diseases that received the support and assistance. It would be wonderful moving forward that not only when the researchers come and the different groups come, but let's just remember that we all are helpers one to the other. And so whether it's sharing data, whether it's sharing research, being interested in what's going on to help those other communities that may not be getting the support, I think that makes a huge difference. More individually, we can continue to just reach out, be a support, because, you know, sometimes people think it's the big things that make a difference. No, it's the little things that makes a difference. Just to know that someone is there, someone is concerned, that makes a huge impact on your mental health. And so I just wanted to bring that up as well. And I think Global Genes is really doing things right in terms of being more inclusive. And I just appreciate that, and the diversity, because we are all in this community, this rare disease space together. And I can not relate to what Parvarthy, I'm so sorry, is going through with her family, but I could empathize. I can be there as a support. And that's what the families need now more than ever, is support.
Those are great. I wondered if you guys had specific ways that we might do that. So I'm thinking about platforms like The Mighty, you know, where stories are often shared amongst rare disease families. So I wondered if you had any advice to those folks who are maybe out there at home, maybe feeling a little bit isolated and alone because they're just, overwhelmed with taking care of their loved one who's ill. How do they begin that process of reaching out? Is there something very specific that we could hand them, or a couple of suggestions we could hand them to lighten that burden on them?
That's great. And I want to say that in this time, I know we're all feeling the strain of what's going on around us, in our families, in our community, in our country. Again, I want to say that you are not alone. There are resources. For example, our organization, we do offer mental health counseling. We don't like to say mental health, so we'll say mental distress. There are support groups as resources. And there are so many other diet, nutrition. There's just so many avenues that individuals can reach out for, whether it's on Zoom, whether it's telehealth, whether it's a phone call. There are a lot of different avenues and resources available. And the Mark Thomas Foundation is one.
Of course. Parveen?
I think we had a wonderful presentation yesterday from Angel Aid. I think an organization that's been wonderful. I've attended a few of their sessions. They've been super, super, super nice. Reaching out to your local moms group, or asking your hospital or wherever it is that you normally work with or go to see for your children, asking them if they have any support groups. I know from one of the reasons I'm passionate about pediatrics is because of my child, but Child Life in the hospitals have come up with really creative ways to have more interactions on the with children who have illness. So I wish there was something like that for adults as well, because they are super interactive and they've come up with some really cool ways to interact with kids who are sick and at home during this times. But I would reach out if you have a child who's medically complex or ill with a rare disease. Definitely reach out to the local Child Life in the hospital to see if they can be included in that. That's my suggestion.
That's wonderful. One of the things I've been doing with some of my colleagues is these kind of virtual Zoom happy hours. So maybe we need to get Global Genes to facilitate a virtual Global Genes Zoom happy hour once every couple of weeks. We can all just virtually get together. I think we're getting closer to the end. Oh, go ahead, Linda.
Oh, no, I was saying that would be great. I'll take a double Pepsi.
Perfect. We're getting close to the end of our time here. We had a great question come in on the Q&A, and it was, how can empathy be a driving force for making these connections between us? And I really like that question because I think it's, with my scientific hat on, it's not a question we often, try to tackle. How can our deep connection, our deep humanity really foster change? But I think that's what that question is pointing to. And so I wondered if you both wanted to try and comment on that or address that as we think about kind of what's ahead for us over the next several months as the pandemic winds down and how we kind of proceed from there, the role that empathy plays in how this community will ideally stay together, work together, and kind of pave a path for the future. Maybe Parvathy, I'll start with you.
Share your story. Share your story with whoever will listen and whoever won't listen, because it's equally important. When I've met with researchers, when I've met with industry folks, they're often surprised and shocked to hear what our normal day would be like. At one point, my one child was taking about 10 medications for breakfast in the morning, while the other one had essential lines.
It worked a lot better when you had your hands far from the laptop, so I wonder if there's just something going on there. Yeah, maybe try that.
I'll wait for Linda to answer, and then I'll figure while we do.
Oh, okay. And I would just piggyback on what she has stated. It is important to share your story, but it's also important to listen to their story as well. That's the way that I think that being empathetic can make a difference, because knowing that it's not just about you, but it's about your brother, it's about your sister. And also, just kind of going back, the faith community, your churches, your synagogues, those places can also make a huge difference and a huge impact. In moving forward, I want to learn about other rare diseases. At the same time, I would want you to come and learn about what's happening in the sickle cell disease community and how you can help. You may have resources that we don't have. We may be able to provide expertise. We all are, again, connected, but I think it's just important for us to continue to walk this journey together, to be open, to be receptive, non-judgmental, and to really just have a heart and compassion. And I know even right now in our society, sometimes everyone may not be as sensitive, but we do need to have that sensitivity. So that's my thoughts.
And just to add, the last piece is to, talk to doctors, talk to residents, talk to medical students, because they are the future of who's going to care for you in a few years. Share with them about how your story is. They're so wonderful, and rightly so, focused on helping us just get better and get out of the hospital. It's very difficult for them to understand what it is that is going on in our life once we bring our child back home or our loved one back home. So take some time, share your stories with them, tell them how it is to just be at home and what life looks like for them.
Thank you, Parvathy. With that, we might wrap and hand back to Kimberly. I want to thank both Linda and Parvathy for all of their time and insights. I'm really walking away with a distinct sense of hope that, there are so many ways that we can bring these communities together. And I think that last question was just a beautiful one to end on, because I think that sense of empathy that we all hold, particularly if we're part of this community, is going to be the glue that continues to hold us together and allows us to be resilient and creative as we come out the other side of the pandemic. And hopefully we're all in a room together again instead of in bedrooms and in kitchens. So thank you again. Thank you for your time and your energy and your enthusiasm and your bravery. So Kimberly, with that, I'll hand back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. So now I've got glue in my along with the hugs that we're missing from everyone. So thanks for the visual, Ryan. I want to thank you all so much for just a wonderful discussion today. Each of you has such incredible wisdom to offer us. And Ryan, I have to say you have such heart and commitment to help rare disease. And I want to thank you for the empathy and compassion that you give to us. Linda, from the moment we first met, you've been touching my heart and teaching me. We honor you in our quest as a rare community to listen and reach for our faith, as you said, and absolutely make lemonade out of those lemons, right? And Parvathy, I want to thank you for being a role model of courage and curiosity and resilience to all of us as moms and dads. This session is particularly poignant with our need for unity and hope and sensitivity in our lives today. And I thank you all so much for being a part of this session. Before I close out for 2020, actually close us out for our Global Genes Live today, I do want to comment on the current moment in time that we are all in. It is a time of so many challenges and crises in our world, and they are so big. First, let's take a moment as a group and send our thoughts and prayers of safety for all of those facing the many extreme weather conditions and situations that are happening both here in the U.S. and around the world. Then there's COVID, of course. More than 200,000 Americans and almost 1 million people worldwide have been lost to this pandemic. We likely know someone at this point taken by this dreadful disease, and there aren't any words that can adequately convey this loss. But we are resilient in rare disease, and we are finding, and in many instances, we are leading the charge to create opportunities for needed change after COVID. In a recap of this week, you heard many thoughts in sessions about the need to create new processes and to protect future research and clinical trials. We talked about how to continue our access to telehealth and so much more, so many ways that we can take action and advocate for change. And we can also unite in our thanks and to all of the dedicated medical providers that have helped us over the months. And we should also deeply appreciate our essential workers that have tirelessly supported us through these difficult days. I am so grateful for our hardworking clinicians, for my family and all of our rare families. But I'm also, with some humor, I think I recognize my local essential UPS truck driver. We've now become friends of the sort because he visits so often, and it's likely I'll be on Zoom when he stops by. So my teenager, who is schooling at home like so many other children, will probably be the one to answer the door. We endure through. We've been inspired in the past 2 weeks by the idea of inch stones versus milestones, those successes, and how to celebrate those inches forward in rare disease, because they are such huge wins for us. And we need those inch stones to give us ongoing hope with so much turmoil in our world. Added to our compounded challenges today, we also continue to face a time of reckoning on equity and race. This is not a new issue, and it's one that we as a society truly have failed for generations. But we have the choice as leaders in each of our own ways to stand together and speak up for what we believe is right. And we can choose to build bridges. As Linda reminded us just a few minutes ago, we can each choose to walk alongside the Black community and other underserved communities together to ensure that we move forward towards a more inclusive future. And we eliminate systematic racism and institutional bias that exists today, even in our rare disease world, where we pride ourselves on our acceptance and loving each other for exactly who we are. It does, and it will take all of us to make change, and I challenge each of you. I think it was Laura from earlier this week from the United Kingdom who said to us, if we want to go fast, go alone. But if we want to go far, go together. The rare community is better and stronger together, and we can lean on love. As a rare mom, I know that hope can be hard to find sometimes. But Pete Dankelson, one of our rare community young adults from early last week, made my heart smile twice as he rocked his guitar for us, and also when he told us to keep speaking kindness, positivity, and social acceptance. It was just brilliant. As we close, I want to thank you for tuning in over the past 2 weeks. You've asked great questions, and I love the engagement with each other in the chat. It might have looked different this year, but we are so glad you could be here with us. We might not be with you in person, but we are still together. And as this session is titled, we are resilient together. I also need to thank our sponsors, truly our sponsors and partners, who without them, this event would not be possible. And please, an enormous thank you to our over 100 speakers who have given their time to share insights with us this past week or two. You inspire and teach us every day. Thank you. I also want the Global Genes staff and board for the endless effort that goes into bringing a meeting like this together. Next September, with luck and hope, we will be in San Diego, California with you in person. A quick reminder, we will be hosting the Champion of Hope Awards Night on November 12th at 7 p.m., so mark your calendars. We look forward to announcing the awardees and sharing their stories and successes with you. So join us on November 12th for that celebration. You can stay tuned on social media for exciting announcements between now and then on the event. So let's now close with a bit of hope and music. I am so excited to introduce singer-songwriter Cameron James. She is a rare disease advocate whose husband and daughter both suffer from atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome. Cameron has had songs featured in hit shows like Quantico and Vanderpump Rules and is here to tell you a little bit about herself as she shares her song in celebration of the resilience of our rare community. Cameron, I'll turn it to you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cameron James, and I'm a singer-songwriter here in Nashville, and I'm currently in the studio of a producer and friend of mine named Joe Williams. He and I have collaborated a lot together, and I'm very grateful that I've had some songs of mine be featured in some TV shows and commercials, but more importantly, I am the mother and wife to two rare disease warriors. In 2014, when my little girl was 3, my daughter was diagnosed with an ultra-rare disease called atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome. It's a genetic disease that is autoimmune in nature that primarily causes kidney failure, among a host of other issues. And we were blindsided by the diagnosis. It took a couple weeks for them to finally identify what was wrong. They originally thought she had leukemia, and the bottom dropped out when we learned, no, it's an ultra-rare disease. For every million, there are roughly 2. And at the time, there was only one treatment. It was the most expensive drug in the world, had only been around for FDA approved for 3 years. And as you can imagine, it was beyond traumatic and devastating. You know, it's one thing to worry about your daughter being in the fight of her life, and another thing to worry about the astronomical cost of her care and what would happen if we couldn't afford it. And I had learned a lot from my daughter, who, you know, she had about 20% kidney function at her lowest, 6 blood transfusions. But I learned a good lesson about not judging the future based on the present, to leave room for the turnaround and for the miraculous, because my little girl completely recovered. That drug was effective, and I also give all glory to God for the way that we had everything we needed in that season. And I like to say that my little girl saved my husband's life. Because of her, we did genetic testing and found out that my son and I didn't carry it, but my husband did. And we learned that even though you have a genetic mutation, doesn't mean that the disease will ever manifest. But because we had that information, we were prepared when in 2017, the unthinkable happened, and my husband started to manifest the same disease symptoms that Elise had. But thankfully, he was able to walk into the Vanderbilt ER, hand them his genetic mutation, tell them what tests to run, to check his kidney functions, and he was crashing a lot faster than my daughter was. He was about 20% kidney function on arrival at the ER. And again, I think she saved his life. Because of her, they remembered us from being at the hospital 3 years earlier. My daughter's nephrologist contacted his hematologist. They were able to work together, and my husband had only 1 blood transfusion, spent a week in the hospital, and he went from about 15% kidney function back to 100%, just like my daughter. And we became the ultra rare of the ultra rare. As mentioned before, for every million there are 2. We became the only known parent and child with this disease that was being medically tracked by the pharmaceutical company that makes our drug in North America. But thankfully, this disease is getting easier and easier to diagnose, and we are no longer not the only family. And that puts things into perspective that yes, rare disease and ultra rare disease, we are unique, but together we're not that rare. Over 400 million people globally are affected by rare disease. There are more rare disease patients than HIV and cancer patients combined, and 1 out of every 2 rare patients that are diagnosed are children. And we need your help. 5% of all rare diseases even have a treatment. We're an ultra-rare disease with a treatment, and we're the lucky ones. But there are so many that need your help. And as mentioned, oftentimes because of the chronic nature of rare disease, the cost of care can be incredible. And this is why it's so important to come alongside nonprofits like Global Genes and donate, and we need your help. I'd like to thank our sponsors for supporting this event, and if you would like to donate, you can go to www.globalgenes.org/donate-now, and any amount you can give is such a blessing to the rare disease community. And now, without further ado, I'm so excited to get to perform a song I co-wrote called I'm Feeling Good, and it's all about the turnaround. It's about when the clouds part and you actually feel good and you're believing for better days ahead, that your future can be much more than what it is right now. And again, I'm so excited and honored to be a part. Thank you, Global Genes, for having me, and I hope you enjoy I'm Feeling Good.
I'm feeling good.
Sunny vibes, golden everywhere I step. The buses slide, bringing out my very best. Turn your head for sure, I'm wanting